It is narrated that in 1953, Kenya was colonized by the British, leading to an uprising by the native population, especially the Kikuyu tribe. This rebellion resulted in numerous casualties and millions of people detained in concentration camps. However, this resistance eventually led to Kenya's independence. The film begins with a radio broadcast by the government of the Republic of Kenya announcing a free education program for every citizen, with the only requirement being to present a birth certificate. This news quickly went viral and prompted parents to bring their children to elementary schools to enroll and receive an education. Among the crowd of children, there was an elderly man who also came to register. His name was Kamani Maruj, and he went to the school intending to learn how to read and write. Maruj's arrival was welcomed by the school's headmistress, Jane Obinsu, and a male teacher named Alfred. Maruj handed them a flyer containing information about the free school. Understanding Maruj's intention, Jane explained that the school was only for children, but Maruj disagreed, as he heard on the radio that the school was free for everyone, not just children. Feeling absurd with Maruj's request, Alfred then urged Jane to get back to work, as they couldn't ignore hundreds of children who wanted to enroll just to debate fulfilling the request of one old man. Moreover, if Maruj truly wanted to learn, Alfred said that he needed to have his own books and writing materials. The next day, the teaching and learning activities began on the first day. While Jane was teaching, Alfred approached the classroom and asked her to step outside to inform her about Maruj's arrival. Outside the classroom, Alfred approached Maruj and urged him to go home. Alfred stated that Maruj would never be accepted at the school because he was not wearing the school uniform. According to Alfred, Maruj had been living in hardship, so he surely couldn't meet the school requirements, as he didn't have the money to buy a uniform. At that moment, Jane approached Maruj with a sense of unease and asked why an elderly person like Maruj was so eager to go to school. Maruj answered that he simply wanted to learn how to read. Upon hearing that response, Jane wanted to help Maruj, but she couldn't do much as the number of students in the school was already too large. Despite being rejected multiple times, Maruj remained resilient and determined to meet the school's requirements. With the money he earned from selling chickens, he went to a place to buy clothes and then sewed them into a school uniform himself. He also cleaned his shoes to make them look neat, hoping to be accepted at the school. The next day, Maruj returned to the school dressed in complete attire and with his school supplies. However, as he arrived at the school gate, he was approached by Alfred and Jane, who were taken aback by Maruj's seriousness in wanting to attend school. Impressed by Maruj's determination, Jane finally decided to accept him. Despite Alfred's warnings about the potential problems that could arise from accepting Maruj, Jane didn't care about the risks because she was the headmistress of the school. Jane happily welcomed Maruj, as she was known to be a kind-hearted person who deeply cared about education. Even when her husband, Charles, asked her to quit, Jane refused because she felt responsible for educating the people in her country. In the classroom, Maruj was initially laughed at by the children there because of his old age attending primary school. However, Maruj didn't feel ashamed and confidently greeted the children. After that, the first lesson began. However, as Maruj was attending school for the first time, he struggled with holding the pencil. The lessons on his first day made Maruj very happy because he finally had the opportunity to receive an education. After the lesson ended and while walking home, one of the parents of the students named Kamau noticed Maruj from a distance. Kamau seemed displeased that an elderly person like Maruj was attending school. Not only that, but Maruj also faced mockery from his peers, who were only busy wasting their time on drinking and partying. Upon arriving home, Maruj reviewed the lessons he had learned from school. However, he was startled by a kick on his door, with a voice warning him not to come to school because it was only for children. The next day, the next lesson began. The lesson proved to be difficult for Maruj, and he couldn't focus. He was asked to come forward, but due to his hearing problems, he didn't pay attention to what Jane was asking. On that day, Alfred inspected the student's neatness. When it was Maruj's turn, it was discovered that his pencil was blunt. So Alfred asked Maruj to sharpen his pencil first. However, as Maruj was about to sharpen his pencil, he suddenly remembered a traumatic experience. After Maruj calmed down, Jane suggested that he should stop attending school because she was worried that similar incidents might happen again in the future. On that occasion, Jane also asked about the bracelet Maruj was wearing. It turned out that from the story Maruj shared, he was one of the veteran rebels who had fought against British colonialism. Maruj was a member of a group called the Mau Mau. They had fought to free the land of Kenya from British colonization. Those who were captured were subjected to torture and forced to renounce their oath to protect Kenya's land. Maruj had even been tortured with a sharp pencil inserted into his ear. On another day, Maruj turned out to be able to tell stories well to the other children and create excitement among them. However, Alfred felt that what Maruj was doing would become a problem in the future. Maruj went about his days at school smoothly, and people on the radio started talking about an old man who was still attending school. During the lunch break, a student named Kamau got into a fight with another student. Seeing this, Maruj quickly intervened and punished Kamau. The commotion made the teachers panic and try to stop Maruj. At the same time, a school board member named Kipruto arrived and became angry at the sight of the commotion. Not only because of the fight, but Kipruto's anger was also triggered by hearing the news about an old man being a student at the school. Kipruto demanded that Maruj be immediately expelled and transferred to a special school for adults. However, Jane assured that Maruj was a war veteran who had fought for their country's independence, so she requested that Maruj be given more opportunities. Instead of agreeing, Kipruto began talking about tribes, where before Kenya's independence, there were two divided tribes. On one side, the Kikuyu tribe chose to fight for Kenya's independence, while on the other side, the Kalenjin tribe, to which Kipruto belonged, remained loyal to the British. Knowing that Kipruto came from the Kalenjin tribe made Maruj angry, because that tribe did not contribute anything to their independence except licking the boots of the British colonizers. Maruj's words instantly made Jane angry as well, because after gaining independence, there should be no more tribal divisions in their country. Jane even thought that Maruj might not have truly fought against British colonialism, because if he did, he would have been dead by now. To prove his struggle, Maruj then recounted that he used to have a wife and two children who were killed by the British colonizers right in front of his eyes. Their debate finally came to a halt. Because she still wanted to help Maruj, Jane finally decided to meet with the Minister of Education in the hope that Maruj could continue attending school at the original place. Jane tried to convince the minister, but her efforts were unsuccessful. The minister believed that the free school program was only intended for children so that they could become useful individuals in the future. This news was then conveyed to Maruj. He was asked to still transfer to the special school for adults in the city if he wanted to continue his education. So, the next day, since he didn't have enough money for a bus fare, Maruj had to walk for dozens of kilometers to reach the city. Unfortunately, upon arriving in the city, Maruj was treated as if he were insane. The school environment in the city was also very different from the school in the village, where the students lacked enthusiasm in their studies and the classroom atmosphere was not conducive. Moreover, the subjects being taught were not the basic subjects that Maruj needed. After returning from the city, Maruj visited Jane and revealed that he was unable to keep up with the lessons in the adult school, so he pleaded for Jane to accept him back to the elementary school. Maruj only wanted to learn how to read because since childhood, he didn't have enough financial means to attend school. Maruj conveyed that he had a letter from the president that he had to read by himself, and that's why he was so eager to learn. Knowing this, Jane tried to help him and pleaded with Kipruto to reconsider his decision. However, her efforts were still rejected. Maruj, upon hearing Kipruto's statement, felt disappointed and left Jane. The next day, Maruj entertained the children in the classroom for the last time as a farewell gesture. Witnessing this, Jane finally decided to accept Maruj again, not as a student, but as a teaching assistant to entertain the children in the class. This decision certainly made Maruj happy. The viral story of Maruj at that time caught the attention of reporters from several countries who wanted to interview him. They wanted to cover the struggle of an elderly man who still had a strong desire to attend elementary school. Thanks to the interviews, Maruj eventually became famous everywhere, including in America. He was regarded as a figure who motivated people to fight against ignorance. Jane also became the center of media attention for giving Maruj an opportunity, but the news triggered conflicts and made some parents of the students dislike Jane. They even organized protests, accusing Jane of seeking personal gain to become famous. This situation made Kipruto return to the school and scold Jane for her decision. Kipruto kept bringing up the differences in Maruj's tribe, and Jane constantly reminded him that they should have moved on from past events. Despite facing strong opposition from Kipruto, Jane continued to help Maruj learn how to read, and little by little, the old man began to make progress. One day, Jane received a call from an unknown person. This strange individual believed that Jane was making money behind her actions of helping Marouge. This clearly made Jane start feeling afraid, so she asked her husband Charles to come home immediately. The situation didn't stop there, as Charles also received rumors that Jane was frequently seen with other men while he was working in the city. Time continued to pass, and Kamau's father, who had never liked Marouge's presence in the school, accused him of receiving money from the media that reported his story. Shamelessly, Kamau's father even demanded a share of the money from Marouge. However, when Marouge refused, Kamau's father eventually incited people to attack the school to harm the old man. So one day, the school was attacked by a group of people. However, for a veteran like Marouge, facing people causing trouble like that was not difficult. Afterward, Kamau, who had previously been cynical towards Marouge, became intrigued because he was taught an interesting way to remember and write a number, something he had been struggling with until then. Marouge also motivated Kamau, telling him that he could become a smart student someday. On another day, Jane received a letter from the Minister of Education. She didn't expect that she would be transferred to the village of Turkana, which was far from her current residence. Learning about this, Charles asked Jane to resign from her job, but Jane stubbornly wanted to keep her position. This eventually raised suspicion for Charles, and he became more convinced that Jane was indeed having an affair. Jane didn't expect that behind her good intentions, Charles would accuse her of infidelity and believe in other people's rumors. On another occasion, Jane also informed Marouge about her relocation. Hearing the news, Marouge wanted to follow her, but Jane refused because she didn't want any new problems to arise. Jane thanked Marouge and asked him to come to the school the next day for their farewell. The next day, the farewell event was held. The farewell saddened the students at Jane's departure, and they gave her a farewell gift as their beloved teacher. However, Marouge was not present at the school that day. Instead, he watched the farewell from a distance. On another day, Kipruto announced that they would bring in a new headmistress named Grace to replace Jane. However, this decision did not sit well with the students and teachers. When Grace arrived, the parents welcomed her cheerfully, but the students were unhappy. They even locked the school gate and threw things at her, causing Grace to leave the school because she didn't want to teach unruly children. Meanwhile, Marouge used his pet goat as fare to ride the bus to the city to meet with the Minister of Education and the President to fight for his rights. Upon arriving at the government building, Marouge, unwilling to wait long, decided to break in to meet the President directly. With his newfound fame, government officials easily recognized Marouge. He immediately reminded them of the history of Kenya's struggle for independence. Once, in that very room, only Queen Elizabeth's picture hung on the wall until they finally achieved independence. The atmosphere grew quiet as Marouge unbuttoned his shirt and revealed the scars he had received during the colonial era. He reminded them that he and other fighters had sacrificed for the current generation, yet now the government was behaving unfairly towards a teacher who fought to educate the new generation. Marouge pleaded for Jane to be returned to the school in his village, and then he left the room. One day at school, Marouge never expected that his struggle would bear fruit. Thanks to his efforts, Jane was able to return to their school. Marouge and his students joyfully welcomed Jane, who was back in their school. On a particular day, Marouge came to school carrying a letter of his own. Since he still wasn't fluent in reading, Marouge asked for Jane or Alfred's help to read the contents of the letter. Alfred then read the letter aloud. The letter was from the President of the Republic of Kenya and expressed gratitude to Marouge for his past struggles. It also mentioned that Marouge would receive compensation for his dedication to the Republic of Kenya. The places where Marouge had been detained were also listed in the letter. Jane and Alfred, upon realizing this, finally understood that Marouge's struggle when he was young was not just empty words. Years of being a prisoner, tortured, and nearly dying to fight for the independence of his country. After learning the contents of the letter, a solemn atmosphere settled in, and Marouge felt a sense of relief. Marouge's efforts to gain an education became a topic of discussion worldwide. He held the record as the oldest person to begin studying at a primary school. He was even invited by the United Nations to deliver a speech to international leaders about the importance of education. Marouge greatly inspired the younger generation to attend school at an early age, and his story became a role model for many people. Learning at an older age with declining cognitive abilities is not easy, but it is not impossible. Don't give up. Even though we may not have the opportunity to enjoy education like others at a young age, there is no need to feel ashamed for starting to learn later. In life, knowledge is not limited to a specific age.